I'm sorry. Go back to that first one. I'm sorry that Theron's not here. That line is for Theron. He wanted some initials on there, so I gave him the initials. I said I just keep digging up different clergy references. I think that's about got him. Maybe I'll become an abbot, the head of a monastery. Yeah, I'm not sure Jen would go for it, but that's okay. All righty.
You have a ring that we have to kiss.
Oh, sure. I do have one of those. Yeah. Well, last week or 2 weeks ago, I was the vicar. That's the assistant to the bishop. Okay. Resistance. 3 Israelites. Exiles. Speak the language of resistance when they stand boldly before the king of Babylon and say, if our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire and out of your hand, O king, let him deliver us. But if not, this is the most significant passage, I think, in the entire Bible. Think about it. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods and we will not worship the gold statue that you set up for us, even if he doesn't save us. We're that committed. We're not putting God to the test. You know, how often do we say, well, if your God's so great, why does this happen? Why do the hurricanes happen? Why does everything get wiped out? Even if it does not save us from that, we're there. Okay. The book of Daniel, its stories, dreams, visions, springs from a people once proud and independent, now stripped of their pride, their possessions, their plot of ground. Turned away from their homeland, separated from family and friends, deprived of their traditions, forced to speak a strange language, expected to worship different gods, they face economic and political uncertainty. This is really significant. Such folks romanticize their stories, revise history, use bizarre imagery in order to survive. So we can't look at this period of time as an historical reference. There are some markers. We know that Nebuchadnezzar was a king who went mad, and that's chronicled here, but also in secular stuff. But they use the history and sometimes diffuse the history or use it to serve their own need for survival. The issue is power. Who has it? Who doesn't? The king has eyes and ears everywhere. Any hint of disobedience is dangerous. The context is fear. What will happen if you do not eat the assigned food, kneel before the state, obey the latest decree? What can you imagine happening? When we went to Knoxville, Tennessee, the chairman of the search committee that took us there was a great old guy, and he had been a state legislator for 35 years. He was Speaker of the House. He was everything. He could have been a congressman if anybody, if he wanted to be. But anyway, he wanted to stay local. But Ben was an interesting guy. And I think one of our very first conversations when I was just curious about what that was like, he turned to me and he said, it's all about power. Everything everybody does at the state is about power. Who has it? Who wants it? What's it going to take to get it? And I think that is not a bad thing to keep in mind as we go through this election period. But that's the same thing that's going on here.
The author.
Of what book? Oh, it's It's named after a person named Daniel that could have been, it seems to be contemporary with Babylon. So it probably was Daniel.
Okay.
Who that person is, we really don't know.
Put together by some other author.
I'm not sure about that. It seems to be a pretty tight book in terms, it doesn't seem like a patchwork. But there's a sharp turn in chapter 6, actually 7. And we'll get into that in just a second. Persecution, new language, catch this. New language, new surroundings, new Babylonian names. These people were not Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The Babylonians renamed them Belteshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We only know those three that went into the fire furnace as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Don't we? We've totally lost their Hebrew-ness. They had new food, strange and non-Israelite. The king assigned them a daily portion of the royal rations of food and wine. Rations, I guess, rations. To the oppressed, food, rich, extravagant food is always a symbol of power. I'm going to feed you well, but if you don't do what I'm wanting, look what you're losing. The young men were being seduced into the dominant culture. For centuries, their families had observed the dietary laws of the tradition. Grounded in Mosaic law, the food laws are a means of being holy, set apart, and they transform an act of nourishment into a celebration of the spirit. Now, what were these young men in a foreign culture to do? There was no middle ground. All fruits and vegetables were allowed. Water was okay. The boys bargained for their identity, for their religious commitment. They did not defile themselves. God blessed their discipline by making them healthy and strong, even wise and knowledgeable. Notice the theocracy. They got that way because God made them that way. Because they were faithful. Okay. Daniel, like devout Jews across the centuries, prayed 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night. Undaunted by the king's ban, Daniel opened the windows of his highly visible roof apartment so all the world could see his nonviolent resistance by praying. Daniel prayed towards Jerusalem's temple, where sacrifices had been offered for centuries and where prayers for all Israel still are being said. His regular prayer ritual made him an easy target for those who sought to destroy him. Strengthened by his prayers, Daniel was not overly impressed by the pomposity of the court. He had the clear-eyed insight to spot a mental illness of the king, brought on by the king's pride and self-indulgence. Did his simple diet of vegetables and water, combined with a disciplined prayer life, give him unusual spiritual perception? Some would say so. Yeah.
Is it traditional for Jews to pray toward Jerusalem? Kind of
Like Mecca? It is a tradition. It's not a requirement. It's not a law. But even in Israel, when you go there, the synagogues are oriented so that the open door is looking toward Jerusalem. And the stand for the Torah is off to the side of the open door. And there's this, like a throne, actually, a high rise seat where the person who is preaching sits. It's called Abraham's seat. And that's right next to the door. So people are looking at Jerusalem, toward Jerusalem as the sermon's being given.
They go in and then
And well, usually they're oriented so that they're sitting in rows on the sides in the open center. Yeah, the structures of I never knew a thing about that until we went in Capernaum. There's the Capernaum synagogue is well enough constructed. I don't think that it was reconstructed. I think it's just had it was been preserved pretty well. It's not doesn't have a roof or all that, but the walls are there, the Abrahamic seats there, and all this stuff. So it was easy to conceive of what this was like. Daniel's three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were caught refusing to bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's golden statue. For the young men, the commandments were clear: you shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. Jews and Christians alike have been strengthened by the defiant words of the three men thrown into the fire. They were steadfast in their loyalty to God. The three men were untouched by the flames of the furnace. God was with them. To the amazement of the king, God rescued Daniel from the lion's den. These stories have held out hope for the persecuted of all the ages. These, whether or not the events took place in a society that has been totally captured, and the culture, the captors are seeking to destroy the culture. These are incredibly important stories. That God is faithful to those who are resistant. A little bit about the book. Scholars argue about Daniel, who wrote it and when. The opinion comes partly because Daniel is a secret book written during persecution, like the Revelation of John. This is why we're looking at this before we get into Revelation. It was meant to be obscure. Daniel, keep the word secret and the book sealed until the time of the end. That's chapter 12.
What was saying?
God. The text is a mixture of Aramaic and Hebrew. Aramaic is a primitive Hebrew. Hebrew is the pre-Hebrew kind of language. So that tells you how primitive it is, how old the book is. Names of government officials are not always clear. Dates are not always verifiable. We know from secular history that Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Jerusalem in 587 to 586 and took Judeans into exile. A similar deportation had happened 10 years earlier. We don't often talk about that. That was the first deportation. The second one is when the temple was destroyed. Tradition remembers a righteous man, Daniel, referred by the prophet Ezekiel. One of the Babylonian kings did suffer from mental illness, was absent for several years, and was destroyed by a Jewish diviner.
Restored.
Oh, thank you. Restored. They're a little different. I want to destroyed. The Babylonian Empire did come crashing down, crumbling from within. No sword was drawn. No blood was shed when Cyrus of Persia rode in. Interesting. This is the second takeover of a country without a battle. Remember, Israel and Judah split without a single battle. Extravagant Oriental banquets, often orgies, were signs of opulence and wealth. The handwriting could well have been on the wall. End times, not good times. End time. The questions of for scholars increase when you begin to read Daniel 7. The book of Daniel becomes apocalyptic. That is a revelation envisioning end times. That's when when people look at Revelation without as history, this is going to happen, and we're going to figure out when this is going to happen. It's a total misuse of the book. Same here. Apocalyptic is a revelation envisioning end times. This is a scene out of whole cloth. Where does the imagery come from? Where does the imagination come from? Some would say it's from God. Daniel, see the kingdoms of the world becoming the kingdom of the Lord. When we read John's Revelation, we will see many allusions to Daniel and the prophets. Some scholars think the book was written by Daniel around 530 BCE, after Cyrus the Persian captured Babylon. This view understands Daniel as prophesying of the great Babylonian, Median Persian, Greek, and Roman kingdoms, culminating in the eternal kingdom ruled by God alone as king. Other authorities think the book of Daniel was written during the unbearable persecution and martyrdom under Antiochus IV, which was in the 167 to 164 BCE, when the temple was desecrated and Jews practices forbidden. This view has the writer reaching back to draw on the faithfulness of Daniel to inspire the Jews to be loyal even unto death. So was it written right after Babylon fell, or was it written right before the Maccabean rebellion? Either way, it's there to give hope and strength to a people that were under siege. Okay. The four human kingdoms then, in retrospect, might be Babylon, Media, Persia, and Greece, with the little horn representing the Seleucid period of Antiochus IV. This perspective also culminates in God's victorious reign. What is clear, beyond debate, is that Daniel, written by a Jew under foreign domination, gives powerful encouragement to loyalty and faith during political, social, and religious persecution. Don't read much of it as history, but as faith nourishment. I like that phrase. It's food for the soul. Whether we understand the human kingdoms as if the writer were looking forward or backward, they represent times filled with resistance to oppression. We need the vision of God's ultimate victory now, and so long as the kingdoms of the world endure. You can see why Revelation would be particularly drawn on during slavery by the blacks and their visions of heaven. You know, I'm going to put on shoes and walk all over God's heaven. Two of the greatest things you could ever imagine: shoes, and able to walk in peace in God's heaven. This is where that kind of imagery starts. The vision. Leaving Daniel 1-6 and entering 7-12 is like walking from one room into another. You can feel the transition. The first half of the book, people confront one another face to face. Even power plays, acts of arrogance, brave resistance, and miraculous escapes occur in human settings. Dreams are discussed, verified, and soon lived out. But Daniel's dream, starting in 7 verse 1, takes us into the mysterious, the apocalyptic. The struggle becomes cosmic. Heavenly hosts join forces with the holy ones to wage war against evil empires. The imagery of resistance was subtle in Daniel 1-6, as if we were thinking only about a few brave souls standing up for their beliefs. But in Daniel 7-12, the imagery is veiled differently with pictures of strange beasts representing mighty kingdoms out of the sea. And the sea always represents chaos in the Bible. Okay. Chaos and evil. Out of the sea come terrifying beasts, a lion with eagle's wings standing up like a human being. The top one there. I couldn't find a picture of it standing up like a human being, right? But that's the image of the lion with wings. A bear with 3 tusks in its mouth. That's Media. A leopard with 4 heads and 4 wings. That's Persia. A dragon-like beast with iron teeth and 10 horns. That's the Greek Empire under Alexander the Great. And finally, a little horn with eyes like human eyes and a mouth, speaking arrogantly. Antiochus IV. Just to back off of that a little bit, we hear the phrase of the Medes and Persians a lot. We don't talk too much about the Medes in this period because Cyrus is the one who comes in and frees the Jews from Babylon. But Media is a huge empire of which Persia is a part. Okay? It is northeast primarily of what we would think of today as Iraq. And Persia is down towards the southern tip of that. By the time Cyrus comes in, the Median Empire is kind of folded in the Persians have gained power in Media. And so it's the Persians that we hear about in here and other places. Cyrus the Great is the one that comes. When Alexander, the Greek Empire take over, Alexander dies, and there's a battle among the generals about who's going to be in charge. And there were 4 primary generals, and Antiochus IV is one of those. There's the Ptolemies and the Seleucids that are have control of the empire in the Israel, Palestine, Egyptian area of the Greek Empire. Antiochus IV is a Seleucid. The Ptolemies take Egypt as their property, and Antiochus is the Seleucids take over, like today would be Lebanon and Syria. I don't know if they want it today, but that was what they got after Alexander passed.
Huh.
Does that make any sense?
How do they know which description fit which kingdom?
I have no idea.
Seems kind of a stretch.
Well, because this is in the text. This is in the text. It's kind of like in Revelation, the great dragon. Well, it's Rome. You know, they don't want to name Rome. They don't want to name these countries. They want us. These are all the threats, and they have been the threats for some time now. And it's like Antiochus is just starting to gain power. You know, so he's just a little horn down here. But I'm not sure who determined which was what, but probably having to do with the order of conquest. Babylon, Media, Persia, and Greece is the order in which they had influence over them. So that may be a clue as to why they're identified that way. Okay, so I want to tell you a little bit about Antiochus IV. There's a second dream that Daniel has different figures. There's a ram with 2 horns That must be the Medes and the Persians, is the way it's figured. Yoked and irresistible under Cyrus. A goat with one horn must be Alexander, conquering the Western world by the time he was 30. Halogran. Oh, and this is a little more of what I was saying about the Ptolemies. After Alexander's death, his general struggle finally splitting up the empire into 4 parts. Our vision focuses on the Ptolemies of Egypt and the Seleucids of Asia Minor and Mesopotamia. Daniel 11 tells of constant warfare between these two empires. These two generals who used to serve the same country now are constantly going to battle. Complicated by peace talks full of lies, treaties sealed by marriages that fail, and uncontrolled ambition of competing rulers. Sounds pretty contemporary. Huh? Palestine was ravaged by both sides. Seleucids on the north, Ptolemies on the south. If they're going to have a battle and go after each other, it's going to be in Palestine. Right? The struggle climaxed with the rise of Antiochus IV, the little horn. The story of his oppression goes like this. In 175 BCE, Antiochus seized Seleucid rule, arrogantly taking the name of Epiphanes, which means the manifest of God. God on earth. In history, he is known as one of the cruelest tyrants ever. His army marched eastward successfully and then westward, winning a major battle against the Egyptians. Aristocratic families in Jerusalem jockeyed for position, bribing and buying the office of high priest, giving support first to one country, then to another. That's why in the vision of the great cosmic conflict, the angel refers to the lawless among your own people. Antiochus Epiphanes, that's the way he gets to be known majority of the time after he takes the name Epiphanes, marched again to Egypt only to find this time that the ships of Kittim, that is Rome, had arrived. Rome was starting to feel its power, and they were in Egypt. Suddenly, he was surrounded by Roman legions allied with Egypt. So he turned and headed home, humiliated and angry. He got as far as Jerusalem. Factions there had been feuding. Some thought he was dead, so they abandoned their self-serving loyalties. Others were ready to rise up in armed revolt, that is the Maccabees, while a group of religious zealots, the Hasidim, we still have Hasidim among us, that word means the pious ones, saw the whole matter as violation of Torah. Antiochus needed a victory as he marched homeward, took out his wrath on the Jews, slaughtering pigs and priests together on the temple altar. And then when he was done tearing down the altar, extinguishing the eternal flame, and erecting pagan altars in the temple, he burned all copies of Torah he could find and outlawed the holy festivals, forbade circumcision on penalty of death, and he built a military garrison next to the temple. He increased already oppressive taxes and executed thousands of Jews. His heart shall be set against the holy covenant. Wow. How's that for a climax?
Okay. This sounds historical as opposed to.
This is about it, but it's kind of giving the context for this vision.
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds like
that is actually, yeah, that's not a vision. That's what he did. Yeah. And that take back. that picture is kind of dark. It's the only one I could find about this context. And it is, they're slaughtering a pig on top of the Holy of Holies. Until the end of time. But wait, a consultation is taking place in the courts of heaven. We're back to vision. The Ancient One is ascending the throne. The angels are astir. If you think the fire was hot in Nebuchadnezzar's furnace, you should feel the flames around the throne of God. Antiochus thinks he has soldiers. The Almighty has thousands of thousands, 10,000 times 10,000. Israel's protector angel Michael is at work. So is the angel Gabriel. Gabriel's the angel that gave the message of the coming of Messiah in the New Testament. When you get into these kinds of things, the question always becomes 10,000 times 10,000. How many soldiers does God have? It's not a real number. It's saying there's so many you can't even count them. Okay. God is angered by Antiochus's arrogance. The Almighty, who had rescued Daniel from the lion's den, who had turned a king into a drooling beast, who had collapsed mighty Babylon overnight, will wage a cosmic war against the beasts and their earthly allies. This battle is taking on cosmic proportions. The whole creation of God is laid to waste or bought with the outcome of this battle. Michael and all of his angels, linked with the holy ones and the wise, will battle the beast. They will receive a little help from rebels like the Maccabees, but they do not need it, for God will win the mighty struggle. The battle will be fierce. Some of the wise shall fall, so that they may be refined, purified, and cleansed until the time of the end. For there is still an interval until the time appointed. The final climax between good and evil is going to happen. It's going to happen here, but when it happens, and God prevails, that's not the time of the end. The time of the end is later. So this is where concepts, ideas come from when people are trying to figure out, well, how long is the interval? When is the end going to come? Oh Lord, how long? How long? My grandmother's favorite saying. I have an idea there were many more in Jerusalem in the time we're talking about who would be saying the same thing. The question is, how long? How long will the time of anguish last? When will deliverance come? This is where you get the concepts of 1,000 years of turmoil before 1,000 years of peace and all that. Daniel fasted, flung himself on the ground, prayed until he was exhausted. Gabriel brought the answer that had been formed even as the prayer began. 70 weeks of years, that is 70 times 7 or 490 years, shall pass after the destruction of the temple by Babylon. Okay, Temple of Babylon was destroyed in 586. 490 years later is the end of days. Christ hadn't even been born yet. And that was supposed to be the end of it all. Maybe 70 times 7 isn't the answer. Maybe what he's telling us is 7 is a perfect number. 70 times 7 is the most perfect number you can have. This is God's perfect plan. This is way out there. It's not for us to know. Jesus even says that. It's not for us to know the times and the seasons. People have been trying to figure it out ever since the book was written. The days of Antiochus, who thinks he is the manifest God, are numbered. A year, 2 years, and a half year, and he shall come to his end with no one to help him. The expression, a time, 2 times, and a time and a half. Have you ever heard that? I haven't either, but it's usually, there's some references to it. It is triply mysterious. It's a cryptic hidden from the persecutors. It's brief, indicating the quick end of Antiochus IV. But it's failed to show that soon but undating coming women, to show the soon but undated coming of God's final deliverance. Antiochus died in Persia or Babylon in 164-63, which is about 3.5 years after his desecration in the temple. It's cryptic. It's meant to tell people there is an end and it's not going to be too much further out. 3.5 years is what it took to take care of Antiochus. So what are we supposed to do in the meantime? The interval of time appointed. We are to hold fast with the wise and the holy ones. Happy are those, he says, who persevere. Some will die. The Bible knows that we know not all oppressed people are rescued from the fiery furnaces or from the dens of lions. Look at Gaza today, how many have been sacrificed over political ends. But deliverance will come to all who are faithful, and not from human hands, but from the hand of God. For the first time in the Old Testament, a clear note of resurrection is sounded. Your people shall be delivered, every one who is found written in the book. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. There's no mention of hell. Interesting. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky. Do not lose hope. Hold fast. Final days are at hand, shrouded in mystery. End time, God's full and final victory is coming soon. You may be a martyr, but you will be saved. Persevere, Daniel is instructed to seal the book until the time of the end. But you, go your way and rest. You shall rise for your reward at the end of the days. When it says those who have fallen asleep in the sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, this is why actually the Catholic Church, just up until a couple of years ago, wouldn't allow cremations, because you have to be buried in the earth to be resurrected.
Plus, I can't separate the ashes like some people would. Some people might need something else, but they're not supposed to separate the ashes.
That's right. And people do. Matter of fact, I sell urns and little urns where people put some ashes in this one and take it to their brother or sister. But yeah, the orientation of cemeteries is always east-west. Particularly, maybe not some modern ones, but the old ones are all east-west, and the head is always at the west end. So when they rise up, Christ is coming up with the sunrise, right? Christ is coming at the sunrise, so that the bodies can rise up and be looking at him. You don't want to be turning your back to him. You've got to face him. So that imagery comes out of Revelation, but it starts here. The beginning of wisdom, or knowledge, is wisdom. Guess what book we're going to look at next week? Proverbs. Proverbs is a very interesting book. Leave theology behind. It's a book of practical wisdom. Do this, don't do that. And we're going to look at the important things in it. Unlocking wisdom. Okay. What questions do you have? Victoria's still with us. That's great. So is Jan. Anybody? No? Well, let's have some career concerns. Anything on your hearts today? How are you doing, Victoria?
Doing good. I start getting ready for my procedure on the 17th. They're going to put in a drainage tube. So that'll be my first step.
Good. Well, get ready for the jackhammer,
The micro one.
the micro one. If you don't know, Victoria has a huge kidney stone, right?
Right. It's a staghorn one because it started growing into the branches in the kidney.
Yeah, it's like this. So they're going to have to do 3 surgeries to get it out. And that's why I joked with her about the jackhammer. Jackhammer.
Jackhammer.
Yeah. Okay. Condits, we're pleased that you walked away from your accident.
A lot of choice for that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We, on the way to church, that's Sunday, we were hit. Car was trouble. We went to care now. I'm sorry, almost. That's a joy. But we went to care now afterwards and got checked out. He was bruised and bagged up, but it's serious. So, yeah, very, very grateful. You know, the more you think about.
Yeah, what could have been.
So, just a few seconds. Hurt, so. Very grateful.
For you two, they can't hear you.
Oh.
The Condits had a car accident going to church last week. And the car was totaled, but they're okay. They bruised up, but that's about all. And I bet you were a little surprised. You know, I've been in a couple accidents, you know, just surprised.
Right?
What happened?
Right.
Where did that come from? You know, it's kind of,
And then you try to figure out what happened,
yeah,
because you're not, you know, it's confusing, you're not sure how.
yeah.
We still don't know if it was a no-fault accident or both people were at fault. What we know is the other driver was uninsured and unlicensed.
Of course.
But Richardson Police, right there. So
Great, great.
it's nothing compared to what other people are dealing with.
Right. And speaking of that, let's think about the folks on the East Coast dealing with a hurricane aftermath. It's going to be years rebuilding.
Some. Up in the mountains, there are people going back in the little hollow.
Yeah.
Oh. And what they got in is the Marines, you know, you already seen this too, have a mule
Yes.
unit. It's just like. Oh, some kind of.
Yeah. Ann's just saying that, yeah, the Marines have a mule unit. And we saw that on the news yesterday that they're sending mules up into, particularly into North Carolina. Okay, any other concerns, Joyce?
I'm having a nuclear stress test tomorrow.
Ooh,
It's just because I can't walk on a treadmill, obviously with a walker. But it always makes you think you're gonna die when they're doing it.
well, I mean, you're gonna die, but you know, not while they're doing it, I'm sure.
And there's the part where they, you know, roll this lead lined bucket over it with this syringe in it.
Oh, no. Nuclear stress test.
Yeah, it's radioactive.
Sounds like you've had that too.
2015.
Oh,
The cardiologist going to do stress testing, I think they're going on third one, but anyway.
So Barb, for you, Barb is having a nuclear stress test tomorrow. I have someone I want to bring up, friend of mine, matter of fact, he was a DJ at the party. Is dealing with cancer. Has had one kidney removed and the other's not doing well. He is not eligible for a transplant until he's clear of the cancer for 2 years. And in the meantime, he's doing 4 hours of dialysis 3 times a week. And he's just going and going and going and not letting that get him down, I'll tell you. But it's, it's gotta be tough. It's really tough. So
What's his name?
his
Larry?
name is Mark Redland. So I appreciate you keeping him in your prayers. And Christy had is healing from her surgeries. And so she's not over it yet for sure, but she's doing well, and we're pleased for that. Let's bring our hearts and minds together then before God. Heavenly Father, visions are a wonderful way to discover anew where and why you are in our lives. We thank you for these visions, for this opportunity to assert that, yes, no matter what happens in our lives or in this world, you are still there and in charge. You're not a magician. You don't come in and make everything right, but you give us strength that we need at every turn. And we ask that you would continue to do that. Be with those who are specifically needing your grace right now. Bless and continue to be with Mark and Barb and Christy and the Condits and all the victims of the hurricane and all those who are working with them to make things whole again. Bring life back to those places hardest hit and be with those who are there to help. Lord, we thank you for this church and for your grace. Grant to us your peace always in the name of Christ. Amen. All righty, Ernie.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you.